The country is getting angry when they go to the supermarket, and a Republican pollster who actually predicted that former President Trump, a Republican pollster, again, let me emphasize that, who actually predicted that former President Trump would lose the presidential elections, now says that Democrats are going to be crushed in the midterm elections because the country is getting angry when they go to the supermarket. In fact, discontent over skyrocketing inflation is the most important issue for voters heading into this year's midterm election, according to the well-known Republican pollster Frank Luntz when he spoke with CNBC. He said this, I quote, "We're not just anxious anymore. The country is getting angry." And he said they're going to take that anger out at the ballot box in November. He also said this, "The challenge is you can't spend your way out of it. On the issue of inflation, spending more money makes the problem worse." Let's roll the tape and see what Frank Luntz had to say. Let's watch.
Inflation has been affecting consumers around the country this past year, with food, clothing, and automobile prices shooting higher. A survey from the AP and the NORC shows that Americans claim that during this time they are buying significantly less of their certain essentials, things that they used to be buying before, like meat, down significantly. They're also driving less. Joining us right now is Frank Luntz. He's political strategist and pollster from FIL Inc. And Frank, these are kind of surprising numbers, particularly when you hear time and time again how strong the economy is, how much more flush consumers are, how many more people have jobs.
And that's the whole problem. There's a complete disconnect between what they're being told and what they're experiencing. The reason why inflation is so important politically and economically, it's universal, it's ubiquitous, and it's understandable. Everyone everywhere, regardless of whether you're the host of a cable news show or whether you clean up at night, you are affected by inflation. It's completely ubiquitous. It doesn't matter whether you're putting gas in your car, putting food on the table, whether you're trying to even buy that car. It affects you everywhere, and it affects everyone. And it's immediately understandable. People feel it every single day. I think that this is going to have a much bigger impact on the electoral outcome in November than things like the Voting Rights Act or January 6th. This is hitting people where they live. It's creating anxiety. We did a session last night with 14 swing voters. Every one of them thought inflation was a bigger issue than January 6th. This is as big a deal as it gets.
Frank, if that's the case, I mean, that has to be impacting the president's approval ratings at this point. But when it comes to inflation, that's a much trickier problem to try and solve. You can't spend your way out of it.
And you can't blame the Republicans. This is something that's only happened over the last year. It may not be Joe Biden's responsibility, but the public is increasingly thinking it's his fault. And the consequences of that are significant on Democrats in the upcoming elections. It's one of the reasons why you see falling support for Build Back Better, and you see the president's ratings dropping on almost every single issue. He's now in the upper 30s. To put this in context, Joe Biden is less popular at the end of his first year than Donald Trump was when he was president. Nobody ever expected that.
So as you can see, folks, according to Frank Luntz, who's a long-time Republican pollster and strategist, the discontent over skyrocketing inflation is going to be the most important issue for voters heading into this year's midterm elections, and Democrats are going to pay the price. Now, keep in mind, folks, Luntz is a Republican, but he's an equal opportunity offender because he criticizes both Democrats and Republicans if he feels that they're not doing their job. Luntz said this to CNBC. "We're not just anxious anymore. This country is getting angry when they go to the supermarket, when they fill up their tank. They're going to take that anger out at the ballot box in November." Now, keep in mind, folks, the Democrats have a very slim majority in the House and a razor-thin majority in the U.S. Senate. In fact, you know that the conservative Democrat from West Virginia, Joe Manchin, and Senator Kristen Sinema from Arizona pretty much have blocked the entire Biden agenda, the next major stimulus package, because without their votes, nothing is possible. The Democrats need every single vote they can get, and then they need the tie-breaking vote of Vice President Kamala Harris to actually get stuff done. In fact, Luntz said he couldn't understand why President Biden is trying to paint such a rosy picture of the economy while many people are struggling with higher prices against the backdrop of the pandemic and spiking Omicron cases. In fact, voters have actually given President Biden poor marks on the economy in recent polling, according to the latest CNBC Change Research survey that you see on your screen right now. In fact, here's the headline of an article on your screen from CNBC. Biden disapproval hits new high as voters give him bad grades on the economy. In fact, President Biden's overall disapproval ratings did reach a new high in December as more voters signaled that they were unhappy with his handling of the economy and the pandemic. In fact, results from a CNBC Change Research poll showed that 60% of those who participated said they disapprove of President Biden's handling of the economy as he nears the end of the first year in office. A 55% majority of survey respondents also signaled disapproval of his leadership during the pandemic. Now, he was previously excelling in this, but recently they're not so happy. Luntz said this: there's a complete disconnect between what they are being told and what they are experiencing. The reason inflation is so important politically and economically is universal, ubiquitous, and it's understandable. He's saying that if you feel the pain of paying more for milk, paying more for eggs, paying more at the gas station, you are going to feel the impact on your bottom line. And it doesn't matter what President Biden says, you are going to feel a certain way. And if there's a disconnect, you're going to make sure that you make your voice heard at the ballot box. Luntz said this: I think this is going to have a much bigger effect on the electoral outcome in November than things like Voting Rights Act on January 6th. This is hitting people where they live. Pretty significant comments from Luntz. Let me know in the comment section below whether you agree or disagree. Like I said, in the lead up to the 2020 presidential election, Luntz had predicted that President Biden would beat the incumbent Donald Trump. However, before and after the election, Luntz was critical of both Trump and Biden. In fact, Luntz said this: you can't blame Republicans for the high inflation. This is only something that's happened over the last year. It may not be Joe Biden's responsibility, he said, but the public is increasingly thinking it's his fault, and the consequences of that are significant on Democrats. Let's roll the tape and see what Luntz had to say about President Biden and about what is happening in the economy. Let's roll the tape and watch.
So if you look at the problems, again, CPI, the consumer prices this year showed 7% gains year over year. That's the highest going back to all the way June of 1981. But the president can look at this and say, okay, this is because of the logistical problems and the supply chain problems that we're having and the labor issues that are all related to COVID. What can he do about this? I don't know how he can fix what's kind of gotten out of the barn at this point.
Well, the first thing they can do is stop telling people that things are great and start empathizing with them. Start demonstrating that you understand, that you feel their pain, as Bill Clinton used to say. His communication is completely wrong at this point because he's telling people you should feel great. You should be up on your feet. Things are coming back again. And nobody feels that way. Don't tell them that happy days are here again when you're in the middle of the Great Depression. No, we're not there. But that disconnect is causing him significant political trouble. And for the business community, they need to be careful because they're going to get targeted. If I'm an automotive dealer, if I'm in the food industry, I'm afraid that I'm going to become a political target. I'm raising my prices because my wholesale costs more, because shipping costs more, everything costs more. But the politicians who don't want to be held responsible are going to try to find a scapegoat. And those would be the two that I'd be most nervous about this morning.
We spoke with an auto retailer yesterday who was talking about how, for one thing, the manufacturers are making the more expensive cars because they're looking for ways to find the higher margin items. So you can't walk into a dealership and not get a fully loaded vehicle. The ones that do arrive disappear immediately. And then there are charges that the auto retailers are adding additional charges on top of that. Again, you can understand how these things kind of work their way down the pike.
Someone's going to be held responsible. And it takes a while for inflation to be felt. So this was actually having an impact months ago, but we didn't really feel it until Thanksgiving and Christmas. But it takes even longer to forget it. So let's say that the president is successful in stopping these price increases. It'll be 6 months before the public recognizes it. It's why I wonder why in Washington they're spending so much time on political issues and social issues and cultural issues, when inflation is actually the voting issue of 2022. It's going to have an impact on what we think of corporations. It's going to have an impact on what we think of our political leadership. That's what the public is talking about. That's what Washington should be addressing.
So, folks, that's where things stand. Luns said that the failure of President Biden's massive Build Back Better bill, by the way, it failed because of the lack of support from Senator Joe Manchin. He said that was a blessing for the economy. Luns said this: more stimulus money would only be a fuel. It would only be a lubricant for greater inflation, and that is exactly what the people do not want right now. He also said this: the challenge is you can't spend your way out of it. You can spend more money to hire people. You can spend more money to juice the economy or help small business. But on the issue of inflation, spending more money makes the problem worse. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Please click like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Dr. Nitin Chhoda with Ignition Time. Check out my video. You'll learn a little bit about me. You'll learn more about who I am, what my journey has been like, and why you should listen to me. I have the fortune, the honor, the privilege of living the American dream, and I was able to overcome the cycle of poverty that you see on your screen right now. I will educate you about the country, the economy, as well as our money, and I will help you overcome the cycle of poverty. Thank you so much for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.